Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Weird, creepy, paranormal, and trucker road trip stories. Greentext and no greentext.
Preface. My cousin's a good man. Working guy, no college because he was military and then all fucked up with drugs. Quit him the day he had his first kid, though, and he's been clean as a whistle ever since. He's gruff, occasionally to the point of dickishness, but he's good at heart. He quits drugs, like I say, and he does contracting work for a solid 30 years to support his kids. Invests his retirement fund into a can't-miss company his old friend recommends, supposedly on the back of insider information. Company goes under, and my cousin, who has sold his own, very small, business, is back to square one, at age 60. So he buys a big-ass cargo van and takes to the road, driving loads of whatever anyone needs moved to anywhere they need it moved. These are his stories, not mine. 1. Cuz has been on the road for a few months at this point. He's made enough money to upgrade his van, and he's got a decent little setup in it. Turns out you can buy vans that have little cots that fit nicely into the ceiling of the vehicle, and if there's room in his load, he just takes the cot down and sleeps in the back of the van to save money on hotels. So he's rush delivering a load of bolts from this wholesaler in Indiana to a tool and die shop in North Carolina. Wasn't even going to take the job. He'd already driven 10 hours that day, and you're supposed to not exceed a certain number of hours in a given period, but he's a private contractor and nobody regulates this shit. Besides, rush deliveries pay damn nicely, especially when there's a motivated buyer at the far end of the run. Maps out a 9-hour route southeast through Kentucky and Tennessee into North Carolina. Leaves at 6:30 p.m. Load needs to be in an hour before open of business next day, i.e., at 8 a.m., meaning he has 12.5 hours to make the 9-hour trip, loses 1 hour going from Central Time to Eastern Time. Loads up on coffee and gas and takes off like a bat out of hell. Hard driving at dusk through unfamiliar states, especially as you get up into the Appalachians. He starts to nod, despite the coffee, as he approaches the Tennessee-North Carolina border. He's about 5 hours in at this point, and that makes 15 of the past 17 hours total. Remember, he's clean, so he can't use any crank to stay awake. Decides to pull over in the middle of nowhere, up in the mountains. Dark as shit. Takes a random exit, since he can't find any rest stops. Pulls off the freeway, no signs regarding gas stations, restaurants, nothing, anywhere in sight. At the end of the on-ramp is a stop sign and a long, straight, old-ass road stretching off in either direction. Turns right and tries to find a business or something to park in and catch a few winks. Nothing anywhere. Finally sees a little gravel road peeling off the main road after apparently 5 miles of nothing. Pulls over, parks the car, and gets outside. Warm and wet, it's the middle of summer, even though he's in the mountains. Bugs are loud as shit. Yanks open the back of the van door, climbs up, takes down his cot on top of the boxes. Sets it up, closes the door, locks it, and settles in for 2 hours of sleep before he starts again. Sets 3 alarms, as always. Zzz. Thump. He wakes up. The bugs are silent. His heart is going crazy. He's worried he was dreaming. Tries to steady his breath. Thump. Something smashing into the side of the van. A loud, piercing scream from outside. Now, the van can't be unlocked from the outside, but he also can't get to the front of the van from the back of the van. There's a wall between the seats and the back end. So my cousin's out in the middle of nowhere, in the mountains, with something screaming and slamming into the van, in the middle of the night, with no cell service and no way to get out of there without going outside. Thump. Trying to think what he can do, and trying not to fucking panic. He is up in the mountains, and all of a sudden he's worried that whatever's out there is trying to push him off a cliff or something. It screams again. He has no gun, just a large pocket knife and a tire iron. Lightbulb.jpg. Takes his keys and hits the alarm button. The van starts going apeshit, and whatever's out there really does not like it, starts smashing the van wildly. Then it screams.
I know you're in there, come the fuck out.
Oh great, it's some random fucking hillbilly, hopped up on meth. Smashes in the driver's side window and starts frantically rummaging through Cousin's stuff. Cuz hears his opportunity. Grabs the tire iron in one hand, and holds the knife, closed, in the other. Flings open the back end of the truck and sprints around the van. By the flashing alarm lights, Cousin sees that the meth head is completely naked and covered in his own blood. Meth head charges at him, he sidesteps and whips the tire iron right into the dude's fucking skull. Guy crumples to the ground. Cousin frantically races back, closes the back door, hops in the van, and drives straight through to the delivery site in North Carolina. Leaves the fucking meth head in a heap on that dirt road. He was too fucking wired to sleep for days afterwards, and stayed in hotels for a while after that, even after his window was repaired and even though it was expensive as shit. There was no car, bike, or evidence that the meth head got to the van except by walking. My cousin claims that he scoured Google News for reports of a dead man found out there for months, but none ever came in. So God only knows whatever happened to that fucking guy. My cousin bought a gun before leaving North Carolina. So my cousin's learned his lesson about never fucking driving loads without a gun. And he ends up needing that gun. In another story I could tell, it's not really paranormal per se, but if people are into hearing it, I'll write it up. He's also learned, like a lot of drivers do, that the real money is out west, driving long ass hauls to various podunk old mining towns still trying to stay alive in the mountains and/or the desert. That's big, open, unforgiving country, and there aren't many people willing to, and/or capable of, driving across it for 12 hours trying to beat a deadline. There are even fewer drivers you can count on to do it consistently, since just about all the ones willing to do it in the first place are souped up on meth, coke, or whatever the fuck else will keep them up long enough to see a delivery through to completion. My cousin, as we've established, is clean, and has been for a long fucking time. He's a hard worker, he's desperate for cash, and he's got a good van. He doesn't make excuses, and he doesn't get pulled over driving loads of shit he hasn't weighed. All this means that my cousin is a very in-demand man. And, what's more, it means that he ends up doing a lot of high-leverage jobs. Jobs that need to be done quickly, and correctly, and as such, jobs that pay very, very well. Our second story begins with my uncle being asked to do just such a job. A good, trustworthy dispatcher has a client who needs a shitload of parts delivered to his business in Flagstaff for an order that needs to be assembled and sent off ASAP. They need the parts by tomorrow. Problem is, my uncle is in Denver, and that's an 11-hour drive through hard mountains and desert. Making matters worse, the load is technically too heavy for his van. The client is desperate, however, and the dispatcher is willing to pay a ludicrous amount of money to get these things there on time. I'm talking $3,000 for 11 hours of work, with gas paid for. So fine. My cousin, called him Uncle in the last post. I've always called him Uncle Bill, since he's so much older than me. I assure you that he is in fact my cousin, and not my uncle. Hooks up with the dispatcher and they load the van as full as it's ever been. If a cop pulls him over, my cousin is fucked. He sets out plenty early, after a full night's rest, unlike the North Carolina incident. Most of the drive is uneventful, though a cop does pull alongside my cousin in Utah and eye him suspiciously before peeling off to pull over a speeder. My cousin heads south through Navajo Nation just as the sun begins to set. This is his first time in the nation, and he's going in with the darkness. Yes, you do know where this is going. It's creepy out there, in the middle of nowhere, my cousin says. He happens to get just the most beautiful night, stars as far as the eye can see, and he feels like his van could just lift right off that old-ass highway and float off through them. He's passing the time pleasantly enough, thinking back to time spent on the reservation back in the Midwest, where part Ojibwe, when something catches the corner of his eye. Black blurs flitting along the very edge of his brights, off to the left and way far ahead. He turns his head as he drives past, but of course he can't see anything, since it's dark as hell. But the shapes persist. He rubs his eyes, shakes his head, and tries to refocus on the road. But they're still there. He's gone several miles now, but the shapes are staying in front of him. He wonders if there's something wrong with his headlights. Maybe a dead bug on one of them? Then there's a long, flat patch of desert illuminated by the moon, and he gets his first good look. Wolves? Maybe a quarter of a mile directly to the left of his car? Nah, one wolf, running weirdly, but keeping up with him. As soon as he thinks this, the wolf starts to lag behind a bit, and he has to deliberately remind himself to pay attention to the road so that he doesn't veer off of it. But when he checks back, the wolf is still lingering, still a quarter mile off, still shuffling weirdly, about perpendicular to his blind spot. He's losing it, he decides. No fucking way, right? But the wolf keeps going. And then something happens, my cousin says, which he will never forget. He doesn't like to tell this story, or any story, really. He's a quiet dude, and in fact only told me after we had seen one another for the first time in over a year, and after we had been up all night at a family event. But he swears it's true. Disturbed, he checks for cops, and bumps his van up to 80 miles per hour, trying to leave the fucking weird-ass cheetah wolf behind. For a second, it seems like the wolf is fully behind him, and he's satisfied. But then, the hair on the back of his neck stands up, and he breaks out in a cold sweat. Something twitches in the corner of his eye. He looks over his shoulder. It's the fucking wolf. It's keeping up with him again. Only this time, it's running on its hind legs. My cousin takes a double take, eyes bugging out of his fucking head, and floors it. Then the wolf takes an angle of pursuit. He's frantically looking over his shoulder now and back at his speedometer. Hardly glancing at the road. The wolf is drawing closer, even as my cousin pushes the pedal down. Before too long, the wolf is running on the edge of the road. Then, slowly, it starts to veer across the other lane. About a mile ahead, my cousin sees two big headlights barreling down the opposite lane. He decides he is going to do everything in his power to make sure that the semi hits the fucking wolf, because he is in a full-on fucking adrenaline-fueled panic. Gulping, sweating so badly his hands are slipping on the wheel, breathing loudly through his mouth. The wolf keeps inching closer. Finally, my cousin flat-out floors it with everything he's got. The engine whines, straining against the heavy load. The semi barrels towards them. And in the instant before the semi hits the wolf, blaring its horn as loudly as it can. The wolf is right next to my cousin's driver's side window. I've never heard Bill lie before. This is what he says happened. I don't know what to believe. It presses its body flat against his car, and it stretches into black shadow. Eventually, he swears, it takes on a humanoid form, with exaggerated facial features that it presses against his window. As the semi blazes past, it smashes its huge eyes and Cheshire cat grin flat against his window, to the point where it fogs up on the outside. He can't tear his eyes from its eyes. It's the most malicious smile he's ever seen, and something feels wrong, icy cold, in the very core of him. Once the semi is past, the thing leaps away, shrieking with ear-splitting laughter and perching on a nearby rock. My cousin can hardly breathe, and he vomits into the seat next to him and continues to floor it. The thing stays behind, screaming and gasping with laughter. He makes it to the drop, still fucking cold and nauseous. He can't look the client in the eye. He smells like vomit, and he tells the client this story, again. Bill's a very quiet and very private dude. He must have been shaken to say anything about this shit to a stranger. The client is certain that he's drunk, and my cousin never delivers for him, or drives through the nation, again. At the urging of one of the workers at the client's warehouse, Cuz goes to see a Navajo medicine man, who brushes him with feathers and gives him a blessing. My cousin pukes again and feels right as rain. And that's the story of the time my cousin met a skinwalker. Alrighty. Let's see. Well, he once saw either a very large alligator or a crocodile basking in the middle of a highway in eastern Washington state. Apparently it was an escaped pet, but he felt like an insane person when he called the cops to let them know that an animal that does not, and has not for literally millions of years, live in their state was just chilling and basking in the middle of the road. Some random, and extremely creepy, woman with very pale skin and long, straight black hair followed him through 3 states, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, usually pulling alongside him and glaring at him angrily from the adjoining lane, refusing to pass or drop behind him, no matter how fast or slow he was driving. Couple of guys tried to carjack a load of paper, literally, printer paper. They didn't believe him when he told them how worthless his cargo was, off of him in Gary, Indiana, until he waved his gun at them. Finally, he drove through a random town in southern Illinois in which seemingly everyone was outside in their front yard, doing nothing at all but watching the cars go by. They weren't like completely motionless or anything, but they did all seem to be watching the road very intently. Like, multiple hundreds of people. He said it was extremely unsettling. I can give more background for any of those if you want. I'll try to remember some other ones in the meantime.
Driving back to Orlando with girlfriend from Miami, about a 3-hour trip, leave at about 1 a.m. Get on the turnpike and it's steady driving. About an hour in and we come up on a bridge with a truck sitting in the middle of the lane. Dude gets out of the truck as we're getting closer, move over as far as we can.
Hey Anon, maybe his truck is busted or something, we should pull over.
Well okay. JPG. Getting closer and starting to slow down, dude throws a fucking tire iron at our car. Misses by just a couple inches, nearly went through the window. Well fuck you then. JPG. Speed back up and flip him off. Not paranormal but kinda weird. I think about that guy sometimes. No idea what his deal was, we had already decelerated a shit ton by the time he threw that thing.
I've got one. Vacationing with my now ex-girlfriend up in New Hampshire and Maine. Went to White Mountains, Crescent Beach, Portsmouth, etc. I'm tired as we get ready to head back to Massachusetts. She takes the wheel and drives for me on the leg home. Have to pull off of Route 1 to get her some caffeine. Fairly late at this point of night. Drive into a town not comprised of much more than a gas station and a few stores. Get a coffee at Mickey D's. On the way out, get lost. Tell her to pull onto the service road and see if it connects anywhere. Get onto the dirt path we think is the service road, but leads in a wood. Dark path, eventually no streetlights. Drive towards a large lighted area we at first think is a parking lot. Try to navigate with phones, shit signals. Look around for possible landmarks. See there's more than just flat ground. Looks halfway between a construction site and an industrial storage place. Huge containers and machines everywhere. Recognize a few, others were strange.
Is that a gun in that car, Anon?
Didn't believe my GF at first but looked over. Saw a Jeep mounted with machine gun.
Anon, there are some guys out there, we should go.
Another area further away lights up. More storage buildings and materials, but can see outline of a few men. Could make out the outline of a rifle in each one of their hands. Agree with my GF to nope the fuck out of there. Speed away. Back down same dirt road and back into town. Wander and take another route. Finally get back on the one. Both of us are rather spooked by the whole thing. What do you think we encountered, X? Maybe expansion of a dumb?
I'm not one prone to supernatural stories. I love reading them, especially weird road stories, but when they happen to me I'm always the debunker and not the believer. Except for once. Now I'm pretty even-tempered and unemotional. I don't generally react the way I did in this story and I still can't explain what happened fully. But anyway, one night, a buddy and I were driving down out of the Colorado mountains back into the foothill suburbs where we lived. It was one of the really common mountain canyon roads you get on the eastern slope of Colorado along the Front Range corridor. Big tall steep cliff walls on either side of the road making it narrow, with super twisty turns and hairpins. It's always dark as shit out there too. So as we're driving it must have been about midnight or 1 a.m. We round one of those twisty turns and up ahead suddenly I see him. Some young guy, about our age, he's got short cut dark hair pale skin. He's wearing a red sweater, blue jeans and tennis shoes. He's got one of those red coolers next to him on the ground. He's got his thumb out like he's expecting a ride. I don't know why but I get the impression he's been crying. It bothers me because the road is so narrow and the guy is practically in the damned road. He could easily get hit. It's night, it's dark. The guy is asking to get killed like this. I turn to my friend and I say, "Shit, maybe we should help him. It's not safe out here like that." My friend looks at me like I'm crazy and says, "What?" I point back where we'd just been and said, "The kid, with the cooler, on the side of the road. Stop the car, let's back up and give him a lift." That's when I realized something was really wrong when my friend said,
"What kid?"
The guy was standing in a place where you couldn't fucking miss him. There's no way my friend didn't see him. I told him to stop and pull over. Pulling over isn't really much of an option, so he sort of parked it half on the shoulder. I got out and looked back. As you all expected, there was nobody out there on that canyon road that night. I even walked back up the road a ways and there was nobody out there. I get back in the car, apologize to my friend, explain the whole thing, and he starts driving again. I could have handled this. I just had a hallucination. My eyes were playing tricks on me, whatever. I could have handled it until I started bawling my eyes out. I don't understand it and I don't know why, but I just started weeping openly, crying hard, inconsolably. My friend started trying to see what was wrong with me, but I was just crying. Really, the next thing I remember is coming out of the canyon and just being aware again. I started wiping my eyes and I think the first thing I said was, "What the fuck?" My friend was looking at me like I was a lunatic at this point and he said,
"What did you mean?"
I was confused and asked him what he was talking about, and he said,
"While you were crying when you looked over at me and said that, what did you mean?"
When I said what?
You said these canyons kill. What the fuck did that mean?
To this day I have no recollection of saying that. I have no memory of the drive down the canyon. Really, the last thing I remember is seeing that kid in the red sweater with the cooler standing too close to the road and weeping. Haven't been back on that road since that day.
Name of the road, general area, city, state, anything? Could be the energy of a residual haunting of a terrible accident that caused you to cry. When terrible things happen, energy supposedly gets left behind. If it becomes so prominent that it's haunted, you may feel the emotions that the people did at the time of the incident or whatever. Could be your case.
I could practically tell you the mile marker if my memory wasn't so fuzzy about the thing. Bear Creek Road, west of Lakewood, which is west of Denver. We were somewhere between Evergreen and Idle Dale, I think. It was dark and I wasn't driving, so I couldn't tell you exactly. We were coming down from Evergreen, so it was somewhere between Evergreen and C470. Link in the description right about there. In fact, that might be right where it was, just looking at that is giving me the creeps. That whole area is creepy as shit, all the way down to Red Rocks Park, which, as corny as it sounds, was a native holy place back to the damned Ice Age. I don't like to be in the hills at night. Up beyond the foothills in the high country up on top of the mountains is fine and peaceful, but down in the foothill mountains is creepy, no idea why. Honestly, I'm a skeptic, this is all out of my purview. All I know is I think I saw something, and I lost time and reacted emotionally in a way that was very uncharacteristic of me. Fuck that road. I'll never forget what that kid looked like. I got such a good look at him.
Draw him.
I couldn't draw a straight line with a ruler. The thing is, he really wasn't remarkable looking. Like, he wasn't injured or bloody or blue or any of that spoopy ghost shit. He was an average-looking white guy, maybe with a sort of squarish face. He wasn't handsome or ugly, just sort of nondescript. I want to say he seemed vaguely Asian or maybe native features, but I wouldn't know for sure. Short hair that you could tell was cut neat, but it had been mussed like he'd been standing around in the weather. His hair was dry, not greasy, had cleaned recently, looked like a clean-cut guy who'd been stranded out there for a short time. Thin to medium build probably. 5 feet 6 inches? He had a clear complexion, pale sort of skin tone. He wasn't roughed up looking like a homeless person or anything. I don't know if it was a red sweater or sweatshirt. Something makes me want to say it was striped, but like, striped in 2 colors of red? Definitely dark blue denim jeans, tennis shoes. He was standing by a red cooler like you pack your beer in for a picnic. It was behind him up against the cliff wall kind of, and he was standing next to it, which was part of the reason he was standing so far out into the road. He had his left hand up, thumb out, right hand in his pocket. His shoulders were hunched up like he was cold, his eyes and face were red and puffy, but only a little, like he'd been crying. He wasn't looking at me, just up the road like he was waiting for the next car when he saw we weren't going to stop. I wish I could do better, but I'm a terrible artist and the best I can do is my words.
Had a similar experience. Highway cuts through military property in the desert. Coming home from a family gathering with mom driving. I see a guy stumble over the K-rail divider in the middle of the freeway. Looks like a bum, hat pulled down over his eyes, heavy jacket over hoodie, baggy cargo pants, fingerless gloves. He makes it past the fast lane, he is 1 lane over and we are coming up fast. SUV next to us isn't slowing down, and I'm stomping in imaginary brakes on the passenger side. Just as the headlights from the SUV next to us are right on him, I see him throw his hands up to protect his face. I spin around in my seat to see the carnage. Nothing, Mom asks why I am so jumpy. I sit in my seat facing forward without saying a word for 5 minutes, before I as if she say anything. She confirms she didn't see anything. She tries to reassure me that we are miles away from the nearest homes, nothing for a bum out in the desert.
I have 2 spoopy car ride experiences. I'll start with the UFO and then tell the murder story. I've posted both on /x/ and other boards before, so they might seem familiar. Driving through New Mexico a couple years ago on a road trip with my ex-GF, then GF. It's 3 a.m. and we're in the middle of nowhere on I-40. No other cars around and new moon, our headlights and the stars are the only sources of light. We're just listening to music and talking when suddenly a wild UFO appears out of nowhere. Bright orange orb at approximately 3 o'clock, it was a few miles ahead of us and pretty high up in the sky. We both stop talking and just stare at it. It hovers there for 10 seconds, then heads down towards the ground in a straight line and pauses again. hovers there for 15 seconds or so, then darts left to about 12 o'clock. Pauses again, then zooms off towards the horizon in a straight line and disappears out of our line of sight. No funny business happened while the UFO was in the vicinity. The truck, our phones and the music all kept functioning normally. My ex was freaking out for the next hour, convinced we were about to be abducted. I thought it was pretty fucking cool. Anyways, who knows what it was? I'm leaning towards aliens because of the way it moved. It was moving way too deliberately and unnaturally to be some environmental thing, and it didn't look or move like any aircraft I've ever seen. And now, for the murder scene. B13. Dad and I go fishing 1 or 2 Saturdays a month. We leave home at midnight, get there around 3 a.m. then fish until noon or so. Our fishing spot was Silverwood Lake in California. It isn't part of the Joshua Tree Park that you see in a lot of these kinds of threads, but it is nearby. It's around 3 a.m. and we're driving through the woods towards the lake. See a car pulled over ahead of us with its blinkers on and both doors halfway open. Dad pulls over to see if they need any car help. He is a mechanic. We come to a stop about 10 feet behind the parked car. Our car's headlights flood the interior, but we can't see anybody inside of it. We get out, turn on our flashlights and walk towards it. Both of the front passenger windows are shattered, there is broken glass all over the ground. Both of the seats have big tears in them. Blood on both front seats. Blood trail leading from the passenger seat into the woods, and it seemed fresh. Saw a drop of it drip from the bottom of the door onto the ground. Dad says in the most serious tone I have ever heard from him, "Get back in the fucking car, right now." We get back in the car. We both hear a loud, high-pitched scream off in the woods right before we slam the doors shut. Drive back home, no fishing that weekend. Dad never told the police, doesn't like cops, and made me promise not to tell Mom because she is a worrywart. Never saw anything about it on the news.
This happened actually about 10 years ago when I was almost 10 years old, but I do not think I will forget it. I would like to preface this with the fact that I am a skeptic, and even when I was very young I didn't see the sense in ghosts or hauntings. I continued to be skeptical even after I had this experience. I still don't really know what to make of it. Maybe you guys can help. Me and my family are Italian and moved from Venice about 4 years ago. However, we would make regular trips to rural England for reasons of inheritance, money, family, etc. Very boring, not relevant. One night in November, let's say almost 10 p.m., when I was around 9 years old, me and my father were driving through the countryside of England. There are a lot of old churches in the countryside here. So anyway, we were simply riding along and we came out to a straight piece of road lined with hedges with a church on the left. And I swear on my fucking life that we saw a hooded figure glide across the road, like 3 feet off the ground. It was dark and the headlights only illuminated a old tattered-looking cowl, robe, definitely humanoid, not a big fucking bird. It just swept across in front of the car in the direction of the church, didn't face the car or anything, then it was gone into the darkness. As soon as I saw it, I got fucking chills down my spine, but what happened next was my dad looked at me in my fucking eyes and said,
"Did you see that?"
He was like, shaking, and he looked freaked the fuck out. The fact that he saw it too just fucking pushed me over the edge, and 9-year-old me didn't sleep that night. Let me just say that I'm not claiming to have seen anything. Like I mentioned, and if it wasn't for the fact my dad saw it too, then I probably would have just been freaked out but rationalized it in my head. I always ask my dad about it and he still remember it. He likes to recount the event at parties sometimes. I saw what I saw. I'm not claiming anything. but it fucked me up.
The people in town watching traffic reminds me of a story similar to that one. Did not happen to me, but a few truck drivers I worked with last spring. I was working at a lumber company and helping 2 truck drivers unload their trailer. Got to talking about the weird hours they work because they would take lumber to construction sites from their dispatch location in Virginia and occasionally do runs for the smaller company I worked for. They would also go to construction areas and load up excess lumber and supplies if they were not needed and bring them back to their dispatch and give the buyer a refund on unused material. So they got home when their runs were completed. Anyways, they were telling me, one of them was a huge ex-Marine, and the other was a bigger biker guy, said they didn't get home until 2 a.m. the previous Friday. Naturally, I asked why. This is what they told me. Had a material pickup in Paw Paw, West Virginia, at 9 p.m. Fuck it, let's get there, get the material, get home, late anyways. Paw Paw is secluded as fuck little mountain town. Main road leading into town is dirt and gravel. Couldn't do any more than 35 miles per hour in a big rig on that road. After they entered town, they noticed everyone in town was standing on their lawns or driveways just staring at the semi at roughly 10 p.m. Men, women, and children. Get to the construction site, nobody there, load up excess materials in truck, leave. Almost 11 p.m., stop by a little general store for some food and sodas. Get food and sodas, about to get in the truck and see the sheriff's car parked on the opposite side of the parking lot. See sheriff in car, taking swigs out of a fifth of Jack. Sheriff sees the truckers, gets out and approaches them with a whiskey bottle still in hand. Asks them what they're doing this time of night in town. Truckers tell him they were doing a pickup at a construction site in town. He tells them to take another road out of town. Truckers tell him the main road is the biggest and all other roads are not suitable for their rig, so says their GPS. Sheriff tells them they better not. A lot of people disappear on that road late at night and they'd be best to find another way out of town. Truckers tell sheriff they will and get in truck and pull out of parking lot. See the sheriff staring at them as they leave and swinging more whiskey. Fuck it, he's just drunk trying to scare us, 'cause we're out-of-towners and nothing better to do on a Friday night. Take the main road anyway, since it's the widest and it's the shortest route back. As they leave town, townspeople are still staring at them, even at 12 a.m. Halfway down the main road, trees and empty fields on all sides, no houses or buildings at all. See a large hairy figure standing a dozen yards or so up ahead on the side of the road. WTF is that? Slow down to get a better look. Creature is about 8 feet tall, hairy and has snout, staring at them and grinning, and also has black eyes. Nope the fuck out. Floor big rig and mowed down a small tree with front bumper while looking in the rear view and side view mirrors. Creature walks into the road and just stands there watching them. Told their supervisor first thing Monday morning and reported the damage to the bumper. Supervisor tells them other drivers reported odd things in nearby areas late at night and doesn't bitch about the bumper but doesn't go into details about the other incidents. Truckers tell him that's the last run they make to Paw Paw or they quit. He agrees, and that was their first and last run to Paw Paw.
Around 15 or so, on a camping trip with my cousin, also 15, and uncle on the way out to the Oregon coast. Driving in the back roads of Montana towards the mountains at around 6 p.m. Shadows are getting long, sun is getting low. Suddenly a storm brews and it starts hailing silently while a steady wind stirs. Uncle starts swearing, murmurs something about the mountains at night, says we won't be at the campground till 10 at least, which was about 3,000 feet up in the mountains. Road turns into twists and hairpins through the foothills, up around and over ridges, and such lightning begins to flash frequently, wind picking up. Uncle openly swearing. Cousin and I are beginning to get nervous because of the weather. The scene is disturbing due to dark skies, steady cracks of hail, tossing grass and golden horizon aglow from the setting sun. Rain comes in gently, obscuring the horizon, then suddenly comes down in sheets. Cousin points out a church illuminated by lightning, suggesting we stop there for shelter. Uncle licks his lips, whispering to himself, keeping an eye out for a driveway. The road dips down into a valley. We lose sight of the sporadically illuminated church. Come around a corner just as a cluster of lightning bolts go off. Somebody is kneeling in the fucking road. Scream. Uncle hits brakes, sits there for a couple seconds staring, then piles out and checks the car. Nobody was there, but he found something just as spooky. The corner was much sharper than he thought, goes off into a ravine rather quickly. There's several crosses and flowers tied to the mangled guard rail. Shakily continue to drive along, much more slowly. Fall into an eerie lull as we inch along carefully in the rain. Hours seem to pass, never coming across the church, but do drive by several ancient-looking gravestones in assortments of Polish, German and Czech along a flat section. Rain never lets up, so Uncle pulls off to the side of the road and parks about 10 feet into the grass. We pull back the back seat and extract our sleeping bags. Sit there in the car. Nobody can sleep despite the rain letting up. I keep swearing I can see figures drifting beyond the veil of rain. Uncle whispering to himself again, appearing alert. Eventually lightning stops, but rain keeps hissing on. Start dozing off. When Uncle starts up the car again and drives about 100 feet and pulls off the road again. Says he just felt weird about that stretch of road. We all fall asleep at some point, because suddenly we realized it's like 4 a.m. and the sky is so clear and stars are shining brilliantly, save a light blanket of fog along the road. Wonder why the fuck we all woke up at the same time. Look around. Back on the road where we were just parked was a huge boulder, smaller ones smashed and scattered along the road. There was a fucking rock slide. Uncle keeps driving through fog slowly until the sun rises and burns it up. Something just feels wrong. Keep driving until we realize we never went up into the mountains. We got turned around somehow. No, wait, we're on the other side of the mountains, the sun is behind us. We went through the fucking mountains in the middle of a storm. Cross a county highway, check map. Around 20 miles north of the pass we were supposed to be taking through the mountains. What?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.